Hey folks, what I'm about to discuss today, I will do so from my perspective as a South African, but I would also argue that the general principles I will lay out would apply to some degree in any modern country. With the rise of globalization, facilitated by the increasingly common occurrence of the smartphone and various social media apps, and in fact, the reality that it's almost impossible to get by in the modern world if you don't have a smartphone, people have begun to view their governments as a kind of parental figure who, like any parent, has the responsibility to protect and provide for them. This has been encouraged by the people who wield power because it benefits them and maintains their position of wealth and prosperity at the expense of the vast majority of the rest of the world's citizens. They have reinforced this by using corporate media to propagate narratives in which you must not rely on your own expertise. You can only formulate opinions based on the words of an elite class of experts, basically a class of priests with no religion other than what their globalist masters tell them to teach you. But in today's video, I'm going to try to explain why, from my perspective at least, the government is not coming to save you. Firstly, we must consider the kind of people who choose to devote a career to politics. What is the nature of the average politician? People get into politics, in my view, for two main purposes. They like to feel important, and they like having the power to tell people what to do. Even if someone were to get into politics with the best of intentions in mind, the nature of the profession is one of moral compromise, because to get anything done, you have to be willing to work with people with whom you have serious ideological disagreements. So over time, even the most idealistic politician will have their moral principles worn down, and essentially, if they stay in the field long enough, they probably won't even remember what the reason was that they got into it in the first place. The reason that politics has such a corrupting influence over the people who engage in it is that when you are granted access to the levers of power, it takes a person of immensely strong character and moral fortitude not to use the power granted to them for their own selfish benefit. In South Africa, for example, and particularly within the dominant political party, the African National Congress, there is a well-known practice which is known by the name cadre deployment. Now, cadre deployment is essentially a system by which the ANC top brass choose connected politicians and their friends and families to serve in lucrative or prominent social and political positions which benefit them financially. This sounds like it should be a secret. It sounds like something that you would describe as, I don't know, a racist conspiracy theory. But it isn't. They don't even hide it. It's in public documentation. Budgets are allocated to this. And so this only serves to reinforce my point that politicians do not care about the vast majority of the people that they are supposedly intended to serve. But you don't have to limit this to the South African context, because when you consider it, government around the world is essentially a massive club where all these politicians, despite their ideological disagreements, because obviously not all politicians follow the exact same ideology, but despite whatever disagreements they have, politicians still have more in common with each other, regardless of their race or their nationality, than they do with the average citizens of their country. As someone once said, it's all a big club and we're not in it. So the hard truth is that if you want your life to improve, you need to take primary responsibility for that. The government like to pretend that they have moral authority and they want you to think that they care about your well-being. But the only reason they want you to think that is that they want to secure your vote every 2 to 4 years. That's all. That's it. In most cases, politicians don't even think of voters as individual people. They conceive of us as voting blocks to be won or lost. They see us as a nameless, faceless mass that must be manipulated in order to achieve whatever aims they personally see fit. I know that this might sound like I'm being pessimistic or overly negative, but I believe this to be true. And once you realize that you're not going to get a grand parental figure to rush in and save you from all your problems, you can be liberated from that attitude and start thinking about ways to improve your own life. Because, like I say, politicians live lives almost entirely separate from the common man, and that's the way they want it. This is why they perpetuate narratives to keep us at one another's throats over relatively irrelevant issues like race, gender, and class. Because if you can keep a population divided against itself, it is far easier to rule. For example, have you noticed the effects of feminism, particularly as popularized in corporate media and pop culture? Feminism taught women that to see their roles as mothers and homemakers was the wrong way to go about life, and the true path to happiness and success was to get a job in the corporate world. Furthermore, feminist rhetoric and ideology taught women to believe that all men are sex-crazed monsters who only want them for their physical beauty and sexual utility. As a consequence, many young women now view men with an attitude of disdain and hatred. Following on from that was the red pill or masculine resistance, I guess you could call it, in which men started to do the same thing, just on the opposite end of the coin, conceptualizing all women as whores who are only after men for money or the other things that they might provide. Both of these narratives serve the same end, to keep men and women divided. Now, what would be the point of keeping men and women divided? Well, you see, if young people aren't settling down and creating families of their own, then they don't have any genetic stake in the future. They don't have anything meaningful to care for and protect. And who benefits from a large number of average people who don't have anything of value in their lives that provides meaning? Well, the multinational corporations who manufacture the products we buy in order to fill the emptiness we all feel from the lack of genuine human connection. And then once again, governments. Because once people start developing families, something happens in that they stop caring about the global nature of politics, and their attention is far more locally focused on what they need to fix to provide the best possible future for their families. This makes them a lot more financially cautious and essentially more responsible. Governments don't like that. Governments don't like when citizens adopt personal responsibility. Governments would much prefer that you shut up, watch TV, and let your leaders tell you what and how to think. In the very best scenario, what you'll get from a government is a leader who does his best to keep basic and essential infrastructure running efficiently, and then gets the hell out of the public's way so that we can live our lives in peace and genuine productivity. But that is not what most world leaders are. Most world leaders live like kings, only they don't actually even have the moral authority of a monarchy. And I'm not a monarchist, by the way, but I can definitely understand now why people are beginning to think that monarchy wasn't such a bad idea, because this globalist one world concept is absolute nonsense and clearly doesn't serve to benefit average people, no matter where they live in the world. As always, I hope that this rant of mine is of some use to you. Look after yourselves, take care of each other, and for now, farewell.